We can start whenever you're ready, Amy June.
Okay, I'm ready.
Awesome. Well, hello and welcome. Thank you for coming today to Amy June's presentation on how to create and triage issues with Drupal. I just posted a really helpful document in the chat here in Zoom that will give you all of the links that she references during the presentation and a few other housekeeping things. If you have questions, please try to hold on to them until the end to not disrupt the flow of the presentation. If you think you're going to forget and you get distracted like I do, feel free to put it in chat and we can circle back afterward. But other than that, I think we're good to go. Thank you so much, Amy June.
Thank you, Katie, for that introduction. I do want to say, and I failed to mention this for the other workshops we've done, is that transcripts will be available. So if it works out better for you to read versus like watching a presentation, the transcripts will be available. So I'm going to talk today about how to create and triage issues in the Drupal queue. And I want folks to know that this is very similar to the way the process works in the track queue as well. The reason I'm showing it in the Drupal queue is because there's a space for both core and Contrib, and the Contrib space is a little bit looser, so we can like play around in there a little bit more. But the ideas and concepts are the same. Like Katie said, my name is Amy June Heinlein. I work with Canopy Studios. I am the QA engineer over there and the community source ambassador. I have the privilege of getting paid to give back to open source. And a couple of the fun things I do is I help organize events at the local, regional, and national level. I'm in the San Francisco Bay Area, so I do a lot with San Francisco Drupal Users Group and Bay Area Drupal Camp, Bad Camp. I help out in the Drupal sphere with the community working group. I am on the community health team. I am a hospice nurse by trade, and so accessibility is near and dear to my heart. I help organize ally talks where we meet once a month and talk about all things virtual. And I'm also a Pantheon hero. It's a great program. Ask me about it. Ask any of the folks in Pantheon about it. It's a great way of getting to know your Pantheon community, getting to know the platform, and they give you missions for open source. So if you are a lack of ideas of what you can do to contribute back, they always have these little mini quests for us to do. Why give back to open source? Well, there's a lot of different reasons, but on the individual level, contributing really makes you feel good. It helps move your open source projects closer to perfection. It also gives you a little bit of open source cred. In this case, Drupal street cred, because we have profile pages that reflect the many ways we give back to open source, and it helps build your resume. And of course, you know, the more you contribute, the more you learn, the more you open the issue queue, and the more acquainted you get with the way the code works or the way events are organized, you know, the more useful you become in the community. So the more you give, the more you get back. And it really does make you feel more integrated into the Drupal community. Now you can go to camps and go to more things. You know, there's another reason, you know, to go to Contrib Day, as well as, you know, the content delivery part of the sessions. So moving into what we're going to talk about today, you know, how to create and triage issues in the Drupal issue queue. We're going to talk about what issues are worth reporting. We're going to break down an issue and kind of look at all the different components of it. And then we're going to create a good ticket. We're going to talk about issue queue etiquette and the do's and the don'ts of how to work in the queue with others. And then we're going to do a little bit of issue triage, or talk about issue triage. And then after that, I'm going to do a demo on all these things because it might seem a little overwhelming at first, but once you get into the queue and see how straightforward it is, it kind of gives you a little bit of an idea of how quick you can get involved in the issue queue. So what issues are worth reporting? If people don't report bugs and make notes on how to reproduce them, or on ways to reproduce similar behaviors, the engineers who build our open source projects have no way of knowing how the software gets used. So all of them are worth reporting. You know, client-facing errors and bugs are just as important as code. You know, making sure our projects look good on the outside to future clients and users ensures the longevity of our project. So UI, you know, user interface errors, documentation errors, or documentation omits, accessibility and UX issues and bugs. And I want to stress that you don't have to know how to fix the issue to report it, because we all play on our strengths, but reporting the issue is definitely a key step to getting it fixed. Of course, first we want to make sure that the issue doesn't already exist in the queue, because we really don't want to duplicate any efforts from other developers and people in the queue. We don't want to be redundant. So if the issue does already exist, you know, we can refine that issue. We can update that issue with any changes. We can definitely report similar findings, you know, knowing that this isn't an edge case is important to engineers. You can add steps to replicate, and then of course you can add steps to validate too, once a patch has been submitted. Now, I say that all of the issues are worth reporting, but I do want to talk about, as a beginner, issues and projects to sort of steer clear of, because when you're first beginning, having your work be noticed and be collaborated on really makes you feel good, and it empowers you to work on more. So as a beginner, I like to tell folks to stay away from projects that aren't actively maintained. And this is where Drupal is a little bit different than WordPress, is we have that core space and we have the contributed space as well. So this more applies to that contributed space, to pass on projects that aren't actively worked on. And of course, pass on projects that have hundreds of open issues. This may indicate that the maintainers aren't active in the queue. With the caveat of, you know, big projects like MetaTag or Bootstrap, you know, there's going to be hundreds of issues because it's so widely used. Kind of steer clear of projects that have multiple issues that indicate they won't get fixed. Sometimes this is an indication that the maintainers aren't collaborative. And then going a little bit deeper, you know, if you find an issue you want to work on, perhaps stay away from issues with over 100 comments. And I've given this workshop before where I've had some people who have been in the Drupal community tell me for beginners to stay away from 10. So really kind of look at that queue and look at those comments and assess whether or not you think that you can dive in, you know, because some issues could have changed status many times, you know, indicating that people are introducing new ideas or people are changing their mind. You know, because in issues where processes or fixes are discussed back and forth can sometimes be complicated for a novice, not knowing a clear path and not knowing what direction to go. So let's break down the issue a little bit more before we create one. And I have an image of this on the next slide, so I'm just going to kind of talk about these things really sparsely. We want to make sure that our title of our issue is descriptive, but not aggressive and accusatory. We want to make sure that people have keywords so that they can search the queue for. There's the category field, you know, is it a bug? Is it a feature request? Is it support? And most of these are drop downs. And like I said, when we do the demo, we can look at these a little bit more critically. Priority, you know, is it a critical issue? Is it major? Is it normal? Is it minor? You know, a critical issue might be something like, you know, you get a white screen of death when you hit the button, where a minor might be, you know, a typo in the documentation page. The status indicates where it is in the life cycle of the issue. You know, is it active? Has someone submitted a patch and it needs work? Has it been reviewed and tested by the community? Is it fixed? The version field is important for bugs and feature requests. You know, we all work on different versions of core. You know, if you find a bug in 8.2, you know, you want to make sure that it's addressed in 8.2 and on. You know, if you have like an edge case in a contributed project and you're working with, you know, bootstrap paragraphs, you know, 8.1, but 8.2 doesn't have that bug, you know, you want to make sure you indicate the version. And the component on the issue indicates what part of the project it is, and this varies depending on the project. The maintainers have the ability to choose what components are listed in that dropdown. There can be documentation, code, submodules, tests, user interface. Tags are something we use in the issue queue for folks to help people find the issues they want to work on a little bit easier. And then the summary. The summary really provides the bread and butter of the issue. You explain what your motivation is, what the problem, what you anticipate the goal of this issue will be. So you can see this is that picture of all the metadata I just discussed. This is in every issue queue. It could look a little bit differently depending on the project, but this is kind of the gist of it. Again, your title, short and descript. You can see in this image that I have the drop down for component open because this one varies from project to project. And as we create an issue, we'll see that firsthand. So the issue summary, like I said, is sort of the bread and butter, the nuts and bolts of what's going on with this issue. And just recently, I think in the last 6 months, Drupal has injected a summary template into the issue queue, which is really nice. It's a series of headings, which kind of remind us of the important things that we should discuss while reporting an issue. The first one being problem and motivation. This is really a brief statement describing why the issue was filed, the steps to reproduce and so on, and with saying that, make sure that if there are steps to reproduce the bug, that you indicate those, what the expected results are, and what the actual results are. So that way the next person can follow your instructions and make sure that the bug happens exactly in the same way as them. The proposed resolution, this is a brief description of what you propose for the fix and the rationale behind the fix. Remaining tasks, this is basically a list, and this section should cover anything that would prove useful to someone coming in and hoping to help with the issue. Is there a demo site? Have you set it up on Tugboat and you can provide a link to it? Do automated tests need to be written? Should folks test for accessibility and user experience, with cross-browser testing? Does documentation need to be written? UI and API changes. UI is a list of changes in addition to the user interface that would need to be documented in the online documentation on Drupal.org and added to help screenshots and things like that. API changes, this is the description of the API changes and additions that would affect the module, or the installation profile. And data model changes, they're the description of any database or configuration model that would change the way the data is stored on an existing site. And these last two, the UI and API changes and the data model changes, a lot of times as a novice, we don't know what those mean, and that's okay to leave those blank because other people can come in and fill those out for you later. So general guidelines for summaries, you should use the template if at all possible. There is a link in documentation that gives alternative issue queue summaries, and you can use those where they're appropriate. But really it boils down to being able to understand the issue and its current status after reading the summary. A person should be able to hop in and read the summary and have a pretty good understanding of what's going on. And with saying that, you're always allowed to go back and edit the summary. Even if it's not your issue, if you have things that could help that issue be a little bit more clear, please add to that summary. The summary should use short, clear sentences. Not everyone who works on Drupal, has the privilege of English being their first language. So, try to keep things short and clear. Use markup language for better readability, for lists and code snippets, subheadings, and that kind of thing. And there is a WYSIWYG in there that people can use if they don't know markup themselves. it should really identify key points rather than quoting whole paragraphs. Keep it short and concise. And again, the UI and API changes section can be left TBD, and others can follow up with documenting that part of the summary. Issue tags, I said that these help us find issues when we do searches, because sometimes tracking issues for initiatives, they can span multiple projects or multiple components, so sometimes tagging things the same will help people, have a clear list of what to work on. We use issue tags when we're working on things for a contribution event. We'll go in and we'll triage issues and tag them for the event. So when we sit down at the contribution day, people can use that issue tag to search what other people are collectively working on. We can use issue tags to classify issues with more detail, defining exactly what needs to be done next, using a tag like needs tests or needs documentation. And then classifying issues on other criteria other than that hard-coded. For example, the novice tag is useful for people who are just jumping into the issue queue. API changes, clarifying an issue as a fact when an issue is closed or a duplicate of it, because not all issues are committed, but the patch might be relevant for some folks. So people can tag that as an FAQ. So where do you go when you create a ticket? You found a bug or you have something you want to work on. Where is that space to create a ticket? So let's talk a little bit about core versus Contrib. Drupal.org is where most code that makes Drupal sites work. It's that core Drupal project. And all Drupal websites run on a version of that core. What makes each individual website or distribution different is what we attach to them. And we call that the contributed space in Drupal, or Contrib. And you can select from all different types of contributed modules and themes and things like that. And there's kind of three base contributed sections. You have distributions. They provide site features and functions for a specific type of site, available as a single download. A theme is a set of files that define the look and feel of the site. And then there's the modules, where a module is that set of PHP or JavaScript or CSS files that extends the site features and adds functionality to core. So to find the issues for a project, this is an image of a project page. And you can see I have highlighted in green a sidebar on the right, where this is the Drupal core project page. So issues for Drupal core are all in one queue. And so in that right sidebar, you can find all issues right there. It's indicated with there's 9,391 open issues in Drupal core. And you can simply select that link and it will take you to that issue queue. And we'll look a little bit deeper at the issue queue when we do the demo. So issue queue etiquette, and I went over this in a previous workshop, but it's important for collaboration to understand the do's and the don'ts, and how to work collaboratively with others, sorry. So things to do. Do try to solve the problem before creating an issue report, making sure that it's actually a bug rather than, something that you've created yourself on your website with custom code. Read and read again any relative documentation before creating an issue, understanding the scope of the problem, making sure you understand if it's really an issue. There's all kinds of documentation on Drupal.org. Make sure you download the latest version of your project and make sure that the issue hasn't already been fixed there, because sometimes our engineers and our developers are busy. Sometimes they will only have time to work on the development version rather than backporting. So sometimes your issue may have already been fixed. Do try to get help from the community. There's all sorts of support available in Drupal Slack or Drupal Stack Exchange. And then make sure, again, you search the issue queue for the same or similar issues, and if you do find a similar issue, I'm going to iterate, go through that issue and mark anything that might need to be updated, provide a full description of the problem as, if possible, using that summary. The more details the developers have, it's easier to track the problem. Again, what version of Drupal are you using? What version of PHP? What browser is affected? If it's only happening, on mobile versus desktop. Make sure that you're grateful in the queue. Our developers are talented, they're hardworking, and they're giving you their time for the most part. So saying thank you costs nothing. The person, just gave you 10 minutes or more of their day. And so if you're grateful, tell them that. A little bit of gratitude goes a long way. And then once your issue has been fixed, go back and tell the community, update your issue if you found a particular solution that worked for you. You reported an issue, you might not know the code to fix it, but you can provide details or files or screenshots, for the next person who might be able to provide that patch. Okay, what are some things not to do? This is a really important one. Don't report a security problem in the regular Drupal issue queue. There is a specific security procedure for reporting security problems. And the reason behind this is once you report that security issue, Drupal has now become vulnerable. So it's reported in a security issue that only certain people can see. And then as it's fixed, then the wider community can see that issue. You need to be specific, so don't just say XYZ module doesn't work, try to elaborate and add the details. That way there's a better chance of someone being able to fix your issue. Making sure that you have, good titles, not just saying the site is broken, please fix, making sure that you're more specific about the needs. Going back to being grateful, don't be ungrateful. It can be frustrating when something doesn't work as you'd hope, but don't take it out on the developer in the issue queue or in Slack. Assume positive motivation. The problem probably exists because they don't know about it. Make sure you don't hijack other issues by posting a question without considering whether or not a new issue needs to be created, so really look at that issue and make sure that your issue is relevant to that. Don't hijack support forums with your question if they're not relevant to the question posted initially. Don't post a question and then not follow up with any responses. If you manage to solve the problem on your own, go back and say how you did it. Again, you don't have to provide a patch, but provide the steps that it took to fix the problem. Don't take anything personally. Most people are very helpful, but some of our core maintainers kind of get harassed on a daily basis by strangers wanting answers to their questions right then and there. Getting snappy and sarcastic isn't ideal, so just be aware that, that some comments aren't directed at you. It could be an onslaught of, just having a really bad day in the issue queue. Don't be afraid to ask questions, especially I like to tell people when you're a novice, let the people know that you're a novice. Let people know this is the first time I've created an issue. Hey, I'm in a contribution workshop and I'm attempting to write a patch for the first time. This goes a long way, if people understand that you're a beginner, more likely they will to point out documentation or point you into best practices and that sort of thing. And then an important aspect of the issue queue is don't assign yourself an issue unless you're going to work on it right then and there. State clearly in a comment why you're assigning yourself the issue. And as you progress on the issue, check in every once in a while. And then, one of the reasons is when you assign yourself an issue, it could block someone else from working on it because they don't want to duplicate efforts. So once you realize you don't have the time or you just can't find the solution, make a comment and unassign yourself. That way it opens up the work for somebody else. The tags field, we really try to advocate not to use new tags. Most likely the tag you want to use already exists. So it's an autocomplete field. So as you fill it in, there'll be a list of things to choose from. Try to choose from an already created tag. With that being said, sometimes if you're tagging for an event that hasn't happened yet, you might create that tag, but that's okay. Don't mark an issue reviewed and tested by the community if you haven't tested the actual changes and that they work. You can test an issue for what you know. Say you're just getting into the issue queue and you know how to apply a patch. You can report back that the patch applied cleanly, but if you don't know the code behind it, don't mark that issue reviewed and tested by the community. Leave it as needs review and give the input you can. Don't upload screenshots of the patch just applying. Reserve screenshots for UI fixes and changes, you know, things that developers really need to check. There's no benefit from adding a patch that just shows that the patch applied in the command line. And then when we're changing status of issues, fixed and closed are really reserved for that issue queue maintainer. So just, you know, reserve that for them. In the attribution and credit system, you know, I'm just going to kind of gloss over these because this is more on the maintainer level, but we want to make sure when we work on documentation or anything like that, we don't remove the names of previous contributors from the project, you know, because they're legacy and they really help develop that code. If you do add attribution for yourself, do also add attribution for previous people who have helped you out on an issue. Say you worked on an issue offline with some of your cohorts. When you post that patch back up to the issue, it's always nice to leave their names and tell the maintainers that those folks helped you along the way. And then for maintainers, we really want to advocate that we do give credit to people who actually helped resolve the issue, you know, and provided useful feedback, not just R2BC +1 when someone goes in. You know, we really want to make sure that people are testing and doing their best to make sure that that's a good fix. So with that in mind, when you do mark an issue as needs review or reviewed and tested by the community, go through all of the steps that you took to change that status. You know, if you're looking at a documentation issue, you know, that you could indicate that you checked for spelling, you made sure the links were correct, you checked for grammar, you checked the style guide, all of those things. And then we don't want to abuse our credit system by creating duplicate issues for small issues, such as little coding fixes, you know, across many issues in a single project. You know, creating a single issue for one is really the way to go. But I do want to say, if you're a beginner and you're just trying out the issue queue, you've never created a patch before, or you've never created an issue, it's okay to do that small fix. If that's the only one you know how to do, just be explicit when you do your first comment of why you're doing it. I am a novice, you know, I'm creating this issue, because that goes a long way. Okay, so issue triage. The issues are already there. And issue triage is a good way to give back to Drupal and kind of clean out the queue without having to touch code too. And there's a few instances where issue triage is necessary, and I'm just going to read through these for ADA purposes. You know, the issue could be a duplicate, so marking it as a duplicate is issue triage. You know, if the bug report belongs someplace else, you know, sometimes it's confusing if the bug was in one specific project when you're using several Contrib modules across your website. So sometimes, you know, people are mistaken and they think it's a meta tag issue, but really it's a bootstrap paragraph issue. So you can triage that and move the issue to the appropriate queue. The issue might be old And for an unsupported version of Drupal, there's really no reason why we need to keep Drupal 6 issues open anymore. So if you happen to see that, you can triage that and, close the issue because it's, unsupported. You can look at an issue and not understand what exactly the steps are for replicating. So you can clean that up a little bit, and make them less confusing. You can confirm the bug, it's an issue that you are having yourself. Sometimes just having a second person confirm that the bug exists is helpful for the engineers. Issue tags, priority, category, component fields, all of that metadata, sometimes those need updates. And a lot of times now I'm finding that the issue just needs a summary. That issue template being injected in the issue is a relatively new thing. So some of the older issues might just have a one sentence thing. So, going back and editing that summary and injecting that that template and filling in those different fields is a good way for issue triage. And then perhaps the bug just can't be reproduced. Several people have tried, to reproduce the error and it's just not happening. You can mark that in the triage as well. So that's the end of the, the formal presentation. I'll ask for questions, but we are going to do a demo, which kind of demonstrates these tasks a little bit further, kind of deep dives into creating an issue and what issue triage means. So I'm going to stop with this. So the first thing I really want to look at is creating an issue. And for the sake of time, I already have an issue I want to take care of. So I'll kind of go through the steps of how I found that issue, and then we'll create an issue behind it. So I have a project that I was looking at, and I'm going to open this in a new tab, and we'll kind of get the feel of this project page too. So this project is called Node Title Validation. And this was just a project that someone mentioned to me about a quick fix I needed, and the saying there's a contributed module for that. So I was reviewing this page, and there's one thing that really stood out for me was this word blacklist. The Drupal community is moving away from using blacklist and whitelist. And there's momentum in the community to address this in these individual issues by just changing the language of in their documentation and across their UI. So on this project page, I found this word, and if it's in here, I figured it's in their code as well. So if you look at a Drupal project page, there's a short, summary of what the project does, but you're able to, come over to the side and you can see who maintains the project. Down here, you can see, what versions of the projects are here. And we're going to look at these because, I talked about what issues or projects not to work on. This project was updated November 17th, 2020. So it's a current and people are actively working on it. So this is a good project to work on. The issue queue is over here in this right sidebar, but down here at the bottom, what I really like is this view code repository button. So I'm going to select this and we're going to look here. And I can just see right here in the README that there's the word blacklisted. So I'm going to stop right there because this is a workshop and we're not going to go into, going deep into this, but we're going to open an issue suggesting that they remove the word blacklist and whitelist from their code repository and edit pages. And I'm going to use a Drupal core issue as reference. This issue was opened in 2018 by Damian McKenna, and it calls for the removal of blacklist, whitelist, and to use better terms instead. So I'm going to use this issue to reference why I think that the module should change their language. So with saying that, now we know we're going to create an issue. And the first step was making sure if the issue didn't already exist. So here's the issue queue. There's only a few issues, but there could be, 50 issues to look at. So we're just going to search for the word blacklist, because I'm assuming if someone had made an issue regarding this, blacklist would be in this that title. And if I hit search, I see that there is an issue for blacklist. So we're just going to look at this a little bit further and make sure that it's not our issue. And it looks like it just wants to avoid spaces in the title, add spaces to blacklist. So this isn't really relevant to our issue. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back to the project page. And I'm doing this for muscle memory so you can kind of get acquainted of where everything is. We're going to go to the right sidebar, select the open issues where it opens the queue, which we've already seen. And I'm going to select this link here that says create new issue. And what this does is it takes us to that metadata. So we want our title to be short and concise. So I'm going to say remove word blacklist from code and documentation. Okay, so that's short and concise. It's not accusatory. Anyone should be able to find this issue if they're looking for it. The project is already pre-populated in here because we created it from the project page. Here's that category. It's not a bug. I'm not really asking for a feature request or anything new. I'm not asking for any support, and I'm not really looking for a plan necessarily. And I can see where this might fit into a few of them, but we're just going to create this as a task. The priority, again, critical. Is it a showstopper? No. Is it major? Not really. Is it minor? I don't think so, because we really are moving to have inclusive language in our code on Drupal. So I'm going to leave this as a normal issue. This status, when we create an issue, most of the time we leave it as active, but you can see the different components here, needs work, needs review, reviewed and tested by the community and patched to be ported. Those are more for the ongoing life cycle. So we're just going to leave this as active. The version, we do want to advocate that this goes into the next version. So we're going to create the issue on their development version. And this is good practices, except for if there's a bug and it's on a specific version. But we want to try to attach it to what's being worked on next. Component. This can fit into a few different places because we're going to find this in code. We're going to find it in documentation. We're going to find it in the user interface. So I'm just going to put it as miscellaneous, which is sort of a catch-all. And again, if the maintainers or someone else doesn't agree, they can come back and clean up this summary. Assigned, I have the choice of assigning it to myself right now, but I'm not, because the purpose of this workshop is just to show you how to create the issue. So we're just going to leave it as unassigned. Issue tags. This is a pretty straightforward issue. So I'm going to create a novice tag for it. So someone who is new to code or new to the issue queue can identify this issue as something they can work on. Again, this is an autocomplete field. So you can see as I started to type, my novice issue came up. So I'm going to just select novice. If the gift of open source had an issue tag like GOOS, I would tag it for that. If I was working on it for DrupalCon Europe, these are comma separated. So if I was working on it for Europe, I would spell Europe right. And you can see that I would tag it for that. So that's the way you use the autocomplete field here. Okay, so novice. And here we go into the issue summary. And here's that template I talked about being injected, So just sort of use these for your guidelines. So problem and motivation, I'm going to say the Drupal community is looking to have more inclusive language across code and documentation. Please refer to, and I'm going to grab this issue that we looked at. And that way they kind of, people have some sort of reference point. It's always good to provide any kind of documentation around the issue that you're creating. You know, say it was a documentation issue where they left out steps to configuration. You know, I would link to the documentation page that shows what a README should include. If it was a coding standard, I'd link to the coding standard page. It just gives folks an idea of where they can look to find more details on why you're creating the issue. So we're going to link that, which I think it already links, but steps to reproduce, project page and code base, use the words I'm going to take them to some example pages. So the first page I'm going to take them to is the README. So I'm going to grab that. And also the project page. Because we saw on the project page here that blacklist is in here. So I'm just going to give a couple of example pages of where they can find this word across their code and documentation. Proposed resolution, we're going to replace the words with more inclusive language. Remaining tasks, create a plan for which words to use, update docs, and update code base, because those are all different things. So we're going to make that into a list. User interface changes, there's going to be miscellaneous changes when updated. An API, because even I don't know exactly what that means, we're going to put to be determined for both of those. Again, be okay with not knowing some of these steps. So with that, I'm going to look at this one more time and make sure I'm happy. I'm going to look at the title. It's short, it's not accusatory. I've tagged it novice. I have it on the latest development version. I've filled in most of the steps in the issue. I'm also going to come down here into this metadata, and I'm going to attach that core issue as a related issue. And I'm going to hit save. And now, if there's any errors, like if I forgot a field, it would tell me before it hits saved. But we've created an issue. You know, we can look back at this if we wanted to. We can come over here and we can add a comment. If you were to assign yourself, I'd add a comment saying, I'm assigning myself this issue. I'm going to go through the code base and find all the instances. But we really want to make sure on an issue like this, or an issue where you're proposing any sort of changes, you make sure that you have maintainer feedback, because there are some options for replacing that word with a different word. But let the maintainers decide, you know, and decide what specific word they're going to use. You know, there's allow list, there's deny list, there's block list, there's all different types of things, but that's really up to the maintainers. So maybe a next step would be, you know, providing some documentation on replacement words, that kind of thing. Okay, so what's nice about this is we've created an issue. It now alerts the maintainers, you know, that this issue exists. It's created a unique node for us. This is all by itself. And because I've reported this issue, I automatically follow the issue. So what happens for me is anytime someone posts a comment on this, I get an email from the account that my Drupal.org profile is attached to. And again, in the WordPress track queue, it's very similar, you know, with the metadata and making sure your metadata matches and is current with what you're working on, you know, making sure that you have steps to replicate, steps to validate. And one last thing I want to do, I know we're short on time, is I want to look at triaging issues that already exist. I was triaging issues for DrupalCon Europe last week, and I came across, I'd never seen this before, this project/issue/ideas field, where it's a list of proposed ideas for Drupal. This is a great thing for a number of reasons. I was very excited because people are proposing things, and a good way to give back is giving your input on that. So on a whole different avenue, you know, this is a great queue to find people who have similar interests to you. You know, you had an idea last year, but you don't know how to implement it. You don't know how to ask for it. It could be in this queue, or you had an idea last year, but didn't know where to post it. This, you know, /issues/ideas is a great spot. So I was going through here, and I'm just going to kind of scroll, and it was on the second page where I noticed an issue. For designs for the new front-end theme for Drupal. So we're going to look at this issue because if I remember right, Drupal 9.2 or 9.1 has Olivero as the new front-end theme, and that kind of just caught my eye a little bit. So here's this issue. Yep, Mike Herschel, designs for a new front-end Drupal theme for front-end theme for Drupal 9, and this is marked as active. Well, I know that it's now an experimental module in core. So what we're going to do is we're going to just basic triage is we're going to change the status of this because it is in core. So this is no longer an active project. This is in core. So this idea is a little bit antiquated, you know. So there's a few things you can do when you triage an issue. One is look at the summary and make sure it's relevant and up to date. And I did see that, and a lot of it's up to date. But for the sake of brevity, we're just going to excuse the motion, scroll down to the bottom. There's a lot of talk on this, which is exciting. We're going to scroll down to the bottom, and we're going to kind of look at this comment field. And, you know, here's that metadata repeated for us. And also here's that summary that we saw. So if you're triaging an issue that needs a summary update, you know, it's right here. So that's nice. You know, it's a very low barrier to entry to update a summary. It's not complicated. It's just, you know, making some changes in the editor. And as far as the metadata goes, what I want to do is I want to change this to needs review because it's not quite in core yet. But what I want to do is I want to move this up to the top of the queue. That way it's more relevant. And when people see it, they're not going to think it's a new idea. They're going to see that that Olivero does have some code in core. So I did beforehand find the issue in core, and you can see that this is in core by its project/Drupal. Here's the meta ticket for make Olivero stable and the default theme for Drupal. And you can see there's still some child issues and parent issues. And then, you know, they have this listed out. But if we scroll down, sorry. You can see, you know, all the different things that have been going on in this core issue. So what we're going to do is we're going to snag this issue number, and we're going to select it as a related issue because this is the issue we're referencing. And we're going to make a comment that says, the theme is now in Drupal. I'm going to say moving this to needs review as it is now out of the ideation phase and into the project. So pretty easy issue triage. I'm just moving it to the top of the queue. I'm letting folks that this is no longer an idea. It's actually being implemented. I've made a comment. I've posted a related issue, and now I'm going to hit save. And that's sort of just the real basics of triage. Another thing that we can do in the issue queue for triage as beginners, as novices, is I'm going to take you to my profile page. And my profile page is going to look a little bit differently than yours. These buttons are going to look a little different. You know, if you haven't posted anything, you might not have any of these links on your page. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the dashboard. And everyone has a dashboard. And the nice thing about your dashboard is it's totally configurable with these blocks. So I have different blocks on here about different things that I look at every day when it's sort of a good diving board into my day of what am I going to work on now. This contributor links block, if you don't have it on your dashboard, I highly recommend it because it has novice issued links and it takes you to an advanced search page where novice is the only definition you've defined. So it's a good place to look. But what I want to do is I want to go into the issue queue, and there's a certain tag. This is our basic search field. We're going to open advanced search. And what this does is it gives us a few more selection devices. So we're going to search for needs. How about keyword summary? Needs issue summary. So we're going to select that and we're going to hit search. And now there's a list of all the different issues in Drupal core that need an issue summary update. So this is a good place to start to find issues if you want to do some issue triage. You know, we're just going to select one randomly. This one looks like it doesn't necessarily need an issue update, but someone has tagged that it needs an issue summary update. So, you know, going through here, making sure that all of these points are relevant. And then, you know, here's the remaining tasks. So maybe that is something that that a person can look to and provide a list of remaining tasks. Or maybe someone already updated this summary. Feel free to come down and scroll through. And I'm just going to do this for the sake of just so people can see it. You can come down and you can delete the tag. We're not going to do that because we didn't investigate further, but a lot of times someone has gone in there and updated and not removed the tag. So sometimes removing some of those old tags is a good way to triage as well. You know, say you were looking for accessibility issues and there was a bunch of them, but accessibility really wasn't appropriate to be tagged, you can go in there and you can delete those tags. That way it helps others who might be searching for that thing next. We only have a few minutes, but are there any questions? But a lot of this stuff is documented on Drupal.org and in WordPress. If you go to the track queue, you know, you can find documentation on what all the different components mean. There's a list of specialized tags, you know, beyond the normal scope of tags. And if there's documentation on how to use those tags appropriately. So most everything you can find is documented on Drupal.org, but sometimes like not having that look at as it's happening, you know, might be the blocker.
This is really good. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. And I think Wednesday and Thursday we'll look at actually reviewing an issue and then writing a patch on Thursday. So a little bit, deeper dive. We'll look at issues that have already been created, and we'll try to find fixes and review fixes that have been submitted.
Yes, those particular webinars are scheduled for 9:30 a.m. Pacific for how to review an issue on Wednesday. And Thursday is how to create a patch, and that's at 8:30 a.m. Pacific.
I'm definitely interested in that one.
Well, if you can't make
I've
it,
not done one yet before, so.
Oh, it's going to be fun.
Good. I have a project which I've already put an issue in for, and so I'd like to create a patch for it because I already know how to fix it. I just don't know how to submit the patch, essentially. So we'll create it.
Perfect. Sounds like a good workshop for you.
Cool. Well, thank you again.
You're welcome.
All right. Thank you so much for your time today, Amy June. We've got one more workshop scheduled for today. In about 2 hours, we're going to be talking about Drupal documentation guides. So I will see you again in a few hours.
Okay.
And thank you all for attending.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.